Hollow Knight is an amazing 2D platformer game made by the people at Team Cherry, but what if it was made in 3D? To answer that question, I decided to make Hollow Knight in 3D all by myself. I wanted to make the game in third person, and to do that, I needed to make a few things. A third person character controller that can jump, dash, and attack, a character model, and some enemies that can walk around that you can kill. I wanted to keep my project super simple, so this is all that I'll be making for this video. To start off, I wanted to make the character controller before making any visuals, so I used this Among Us capsule as my placeholder character. I initially used the built-in character controller component that comes with Unity. However, the more I worked with it, the more problems I seemed to encounter. For one, I could not make my character jump the way I wanted it to, which is very important to Hollow Knight. The gravity just did not work as I hoped, and it had me pulling my hair out. I spent a few days messing with this character controller to get it to work, but the character refused to be controlled. So I ditched the built-in controller and made my own version. I used rigid body and forces to move the character around. I added custom gravity to my character controller to make the jump feel exactly how I wanted it to. And I also added the dash mechanic from Hollow Knight. It was so much easier to create all these from scratch than trying to get the built-in character control to work. The built-in controller handles different types of terrains and slopes really well, which my version didn't, but there are not going to be any slopes in the game, so I guess I'm fine with it for now. One of my goals with this project was to learn to write clean and modular code that I can reuse. So once I was more or less happy with how my controller was working, I worked on refactoring all the code into different scripts. I created one script for handling gravity, one for moving the player around, one for dashing, one for handling inputs, etc. I separated the code in a way that would let me use the same script on different objects. I also made use of Unity's new input system and Unity's event system, which made me feel like a programming expert. By the way, while working on my project, I got this video by Polyknight recommended to me, and I want to make it clear that I came up with this idea myself and I'm not trying to copy him. Give his video a watch after you're done with mine. Overall, the project was coming along really well so far. Next, I worked on the combat. Combat is an essential part of Hollow Knight. The combat system is pretty simple really. When you press the button, it looks for objects within a certain radius in front of the player, and if there is an object that can take damage, it'll take damage and do other cool stuff like getting knocked back and whatnot. I use C# interfaces to create damageable objects, which will later allow me to make different types of objects that can take damage and react to it in different ways. Now, Hollow Knight isn't really Hollow Knight without our Hollow Knight character. So I opened up my favorite 3D application, Blender, and imported a reference and started modeling away. Modeling the character was a breeze, and I'm pretty happy with the results. I did make a little adjustment to his cloak thing because I plan to use Unity's cloth system on it. However, that didn't go too well, but we'll get to it later. I then used Blender's Rigify add-on to quickly rig our little character. I quickly created some animations for our character and then tried to test importing it into Unity. The first import test seemed to go really well. The feeling of seeing your 3D model moving and jumping around inside a game engine is a different kind of awesome. It's like watching your baby learning to walk for the first time. I also experimented with the cloth physics on the cloak, and as you can see, it works absolutely perfectly. Even after messing around with the cloth settings and whatnot, it didn't seem to work perfectly, but I wasn't gonna waste any more time on this project than I already have, so I moved on to creating actual animations for this character. Back into Blender, I created an idle, walk, jump, and dash animations for our character. Look at that beautiful walk animation. Truly a masterpiece. After the animations were created, I imported it to Unity and amazing. I'm not sure why the walk animation was like this, so I recreated the walking animation again, and this time it worked fine after importing. Don't you just love it when you fix mistakes like that? I then added some slight effects to make the character feel a little juicier to control, and then I needed an enemy. For the enemy, I chose to recreate the Crawlid from the game because it's one of the simplest enemy types. Just like earlier, I used an Among Us as a placeholder for my enemy, and then reused my gravity and ground check scripts. It felt great being able to reuse my scripts like that. The new script I made for the enemy is a simple patrol script that makes the enemy move from one point to another. As I am an expert programmer, I never encountered a single bug when creating the script. Once I was happy with the logic, I fired up Blender to create the visuals of the Crawlid. Creating the visuals was pretty easy and my Crawlid was starting to come to life. I also created a simple rig and animations for my little Crawlid, so it seemed more alive, and it was already more fun to kill. I also reworked the Hollow Knight character a little bit. I remade his rig and all the animations. I added his cloth physics and stuff like that in Unity, created his nail and all that good stuff. I still had some slight issues with the character, but I ran out of motivation to work on this game, so that's where I left it. With that, the main parts of the project were in place, and my next goal was to make it prettier. So I worked on Juice. Particles, sound effects, camera shakes, fixed some character animations and stuff, and I also designed a simple level. The simple polish makes this game really stand out, and I'm really quite happy with how it turned out. I think Team Cherry should hire me if they ever decide to make this game in 3D. Anyway, that's all I have to show for this video. Don't forget to watch Polyknight's video too. And I'll see you later.